All right, well, it's good to be with you again today, and thank you for joining me. I'm excited to talk with you today about this principle of optimal growth. Now, when we talk about optimal growth means being able to grow in life in the most optimal way, right? So growing quickly, growing efficiently, and growing into kind of the best version of ourselves. And certainly in any relationship, we want to be able to grow for our own sake, but also grow for the benefit of our partner. Two people being willing to grow themselves toward a better version of themselves, constantly kind of improving while they work to connect with one another, is going to make for a fantastic relationship. So growth is really important, especially in my field. I spend a lot of time each day helping individuals learn how to grow and helping them grow into kind of this more refined, more positive version of who they are, and really growing toward their goals, those goals that they have in life that are the most meaningful to them. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is that concept of optimal growth. And in referencing this topic, I'll kind of make note of there's an optimal growth course module that we've put together. It's a video course that Renew Relationship Counseling has put out with a bunch of other video courses. And it kind of goes into some of these principles in more detail. So feel free to check that out. It's called Optimal Growth, and you can find it with all the other Renew System video courses. But let's jump into this topic a little bit today. And I wanted to speak about a piece specifically when it comes to receiving feedback from others. So you'll remember in the Optimal Growth course, we talk about this idea of optimal growth occurring when there's this combination of being able to look at myself, being able to receive feedback from other individuals, and then taking that information, that self-reflection and that feedback that I receive from others, taking that information and applying it to myself in a way that I'm using it to grow. I'm learning about myself, and I'm developing myself, and I'm applying that information toward growth. That's how optimal growth occurs. And there's two key principles that keep people from growing. And one of those is when an individual ends up over-internalizing information. What over-internalizing means is that they're taking the information that they're getting as they look at themselves or as they receive from others, they're taking that information too personally. So they're using that information to judge themselves, not just their performance. They're judging their own value, and they're judging their own worth. And when a person does that with feedback, when they use feedback to judge not just their performance, but their own value and worth, it can be easy for an individual to start to be shut down by what seems like negative or less than ideal information about themselves. We call that over-internalizing, right? So I'm taking that information too internally. I'm taking it too deep, right? I'm using it to judge my worth, not just how well I'm doing in any particular thing. That's called over-internalizing. And on the other side of the spectrum from over-internalizing is this concept of being dismissive, right? This tendency to kind of be aloof to the information that I'm looking at. So either internally feeling like I've got my stuff together, I don't need to take a look at myself, I'm pretty ideal as I currently exist, right? So being a little bit on that prideful side of things, or whether it's in a relationship with another person that I feel like I know better than they do. They don't really have anything much that they can offer me, right? So I can be too dismissive to other individuals and too aloof to the information that they may give me, as well as being dismissive to my own feedback, my own insights, right? Not even looking internally because I feel like I got it together, right? And what's interesting, kind of the irony of that, is oftentimes at the heart of being too dismissive is an insecurity inside, right? That if I find things that are imperfect about me or have some flaw in me, that it means something about my value or my worth. And therefore, I don't even look. I don't even take a look, right? I pretend to myself or pretend to others like there's nothing to look at inside me. So sometimes the roots of that being aloof or dismissive are actually centered in insecurity about my value, and which comes out of that over-internalizing problem. And then there's some of us that we kind of flow between both of these, right? That in any given conversation, maybe sometimes I might take things so personally that I have hurt feelings, right? Like, oh, okay, I get it. You're just saying that I'm not worth anything, right? Like that I don't matter, that I'm just stupid. I guess that's what I'm hearing, right? So we can respond that way in a conversation with somebody. And then in the next minute, we can be a little bit more aloof and dismissive, right? We can be like, whatever, that's a dumb idea. I'm not even listening to it. We're done. Shh, we're done with this conversation, right? Like, so we can sometimes vacillate between both. I wouldn't necessarily call that bipolar, but we can be bipolar in that thing sometimes, even in the same conversation. So this idea then, if I get too far off balance, right? So the balanced, optimal place I want to be in is that ability to look at myself, learn from others, and then apply that information toward growth, right? That's the balanced place that I want to be. And if we get off balance, we can get into this like self-loathing, over-internalizing place where I'm taking it too deep and I'm using it to judge my value and my worth, not just taking a look at how well I'm performing, but judging my value and worth. Or I can be on the other side of the spectrum where I'm being too aloof, I'm being too dismissive with the information that I'm taking in. Neither one of those places really allow growth to occur. And we want to be in that middle place. Well, I told you today, specifically, I wanted to talk about this idea of who do I receive information from, right? So one side of this is being able to look at myself. The other one is being able to hear information from others, receiving feedback from other people, and kind of discerning who should I receive that feedback from, or discerning how deep should I let that feedback in, depending upon the person. So let me give you an extreme example, right? If we were talking about a bully, right? So let's say that there's a bully in your workplace, or there's a bully in your academic environment. Let's say there's a bully in your neighborhood. Let's say you're dealing with a bully, right? A bully is coming from an angle of a desire to hurt you, right? So oftentimes a bully is so caught up in whatever's going on in their own personal life that they're coming from this angle of wanting to injure or hurt another person. And of course, if an individual is coming from this desire to hurt, we want to make sure that we're leaning toward this dismissive side of the spectrum, right? We want to lean toward dismissiveness in a relationship like that, right? Versus leaning toward the side of internalizing that information, right? And the reason that we want to do that is because the bully's not really in a healthy position to provide you quality feedback for your own wellness, right? A bully is too caught up in whatever's going on in their world, whatever pain and stress and frustration and mistreatment that they're going through in their world. They're too caught up in that to really provide you good, honest, valuable, growth-promoting feedback. And as a result of that, we want to be sure that we're leaning on the dismissive side, not taking too much of that information in, maybe not taking any of that information in, right? So we call that some boundaries, emotional boundaries and relational boundaries, having some internal boundaries that are able to kind of slough that off, right? Like water off a duck's back. There's probably not a lot there for you to internalize. Now, if we gave an example on the other side of the spectrum, we might talk about an individual who loves you dearly. So a best friend, a sibling, or a family member, right? And I hope our goal at Renew is that can be your spouse as well, right? So that person on the other side of the spectrum is somebody who's in a much healthier place. The healthier a person is, the more internal you can take their feedback. Right? You can take that into closer places in your mind and your heart, deeper places inside you, the healthier that person is. Because they're in a healthier place to provide you good quality feedback. Feedback that's meant to help you grow, right? And you know that they're coming from a loving place. So with an individual like that, with a relationship like that, where you know that they're a pretty healthy person and they know you pretty well and they have your best interest in mind, taking some of that feedback in on a higher level will be more important. We want to lean toward that internalizing side of the balance, right? I want to be more open in a relationship with somebody like that for the feedback they may have for me than somebody who's on this bullying, kind of trying to hurt me side of things, right? Like in that type of a relationship, I want to lean toward the side of dismissive or being a little aloof to the feedback they might be giving me, just because it's not coming from as informed and as healthy of a place, right? So as you go through your life and you're thinking about this taking in feedback idea, we want to be discerning and think through your relationships for a minute. If you just pause right now in this video and you ask yourself the question, the people that I'm around most, right? You might think of a coworker. And a coworker, you might ask yourself, maybe even a boss, right? Or a manager. You might ask yourself a little bit, are they trying to give me feedback? And are they a healthy person, right? And when I ask, are they a healthy person, what I mean by healthy person is, are they fairly centered themselves in their own life? And do they have a good understanding of you, a good experience with you, and a good knowledge about you? And the most key piece is, do you feel that they care for you, right? Do you matter to them? Are you important to them, right? If you're answering yes to those questions, right, that they know you well, that they have your best interest in mind, that they care for you, right, and that they're familiar enough with you. If you're answering those questions yes, that's probably a relationship you want to lean a little bit more on that internalizing side of things, right? We want to lean on that side of trying to be more open in that relationship to whatever feedback they may have for you than average. Because you can be confident probably that it's going to come from a healthy place that'll help you grow, right? And then you can think about other relationships in your life, right? Is there a coworker that's more on that hurtful or bullying side of things? Or is there a family member, right, that's in that place, or a neighbor that's in that place, right? And the way that you can tell that you want to limit the amount of information that you're letting in, right, that you're kind of keeping it more aloof, or you're kind of being more dismissive with it. A way that you can tell that you want to do that is if you feel from this person an intent to hurt you, or an intent to tear you down, right? Or if this person is trying to provide you a lot of feedback in a really critical way, right? Or they're providing it in a hateful or hurtful way. Right, you can bet in a situation like that there's more about what's going on inside of them that's not healthy than anything you ought to be taking in and personalizing, right? We want to have a good emotional boundary, relational boundary in that. It doesn't mean you have to be rude and be like, talk to the hand, right? It doesn't mean you have to be hurtful back. Many of us want to knee-jerk in that way. In a relationship where we feel somebody's trying to be hurtful to us, we want to become hurtful in return, right? So it doesn't mean that you need to do that, engage in any of that behavior, but you might quietly and silently internally just say, you know what, I don't think a lot of that is for me. I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time thinking about that, pondering that, or bringing that internal, right? I don't think that person's in a healthy enough place to be able to provide me feedback, right? So think through your relationships, right? And some of those that are the most meaningful to you, some of those that are closest to you, kind of asking yourself that question, how healthy is this person? And you might even, it can be helpful sometimes to even put a percent rating on it, right? So you might, with some of those relationships, put a percentage in there that says, you know, this person, my brother, I know he loves me a ton, right? So I'm going to be about 95% open in that relationship. If he's got feedback for me, if he's got counsel for me, advice for me, I want to have a heart pretty much all the way open, right? And then you might look at that and say, that coworker that drives me nuts, I'm not sure that they have their head on straight in their own life. I think I'm going to kind of be maybe 5% open. They may have a nugget here or there that's really helpful for me, but in general, I don't think I'm going to take a lot of that personal. I think that has more to do with what's personal in their life than something that I ought to take personal for my life, right? So kind of assessing that so that we can kind of flex in this place. We want to be balanced in general in looking at ourselves with eyes open and a heart open, not to criticize ourselves, not to judge ourselves, not to hate on ourselves, but to be willing to look at ourselves to kind of really assess, how am I doing? Separate from my value, how's my performance, right? I hope we're all believing in our worth and in our value, but we want to grow. And in order to know that, I need to understand the pieces that could use growth. So looking at ourselves, but also being willing to take that information in from others. Now, here's another way you can tell if you're being healthy with this principle. If in general, if you look at your relationships in your life, and as you go through these individual people, especially the people that are the most important in your world, and you rarely receive feedback from them, right? So maybe they try to help or counsel or support, and you're pretty much dismissive all the time. That could be something that you would definitely want to work on, right? Like next time that they're trying to share something with you, really trying to take that in a little bit, leaning more toward this internalizing side, right? Because most of the time, people who care about you, people who are in your world that genuinely care, they're not trying to give you feedback to tear you down. They're trying to give you feedback to remove obstacles between you and them. They want to be closer to you. They want to be more connected to you, right? And if you're too dismissive in those relationships, you're dismissing the things that for them make it hard to be connected to you. And if you dismiss those things as they're unimportant, or this person's uninformed, or they don't get it, right? That they're not smart enough. If you're dismissing it too much, it sends a signal to this person that really wants to be connected to you in a healthy way, that they're going to have to deal with those obstacles, which inevitably is going to create distance between you and them that's going to make it hard for them to be close to you, right? And we want to make sure you're not doing that. Too much of that starts to turn into narcissistic tendencies, right? Now, I'm not diagnosing anybody out there, but it's good to ask yourself the question, right? Am I on too much on this dismissive side of things? With myself, I hardly ever let myself look at any imperfections or flaw. And with other relationships, I hardly ever am willing to take a look at the feedback that they may have for me, right? So that's too dismissive. And then on the other side, right, on that internalizing side, you might ask yourself the question, am I constantly feeling defensive? Or am I constantly feeling catastrophic when people give me feedback, even slight feedback, right? When somebody says, hey, I really wish you could get this task done a little bit quicker at work, right? If they're coming and saying, Nevin, you're a little slow on your paperwork. It would really be nice if you could get that done same day. And I just fall apart inside, right? If I'm just like, I'm the worst and I'm terrible and I'm always messing things up, right? If you're in that place, that's telling you that you're probably leaning too much on this internalizing side, right? It might mean that there's a weak sense of self-esteem in there. It doesn't make you weak, right? But the identity and the self-esteem is pretty fragile. And as a result, it's hard for anybody to give me feedback because it shuts me down and makes me feel brittle all the time. So the same type of issue can happen. Those that want to be close to me, those that want to be connected to me, they learn really quickly they can't give me much feedback. They can't talk to me much about their experience and their relationship with me. Because when they do, I have a tendency to want to shut down, right? I start to fall apart. And then they busy themselves with trying to reassure me and strengthen me, or they get frustrated because they just can't talk to me about meaningful things. It says that the items in the relationship that are between them and me, that they would like for me to understand better so that they can start to, and I can start to remove them to allow us to be closer together. It teaches them that they'll never be without those barriers in our relationship because they just can't talk about them, right? So it creates distance that might be hurtful for me and them, that we both wish we could be closer together, but they just can't ever give me feedback because I tend to fall apart, right? So asking yourself that question, kind of assessing that inside yourself. This video isn't meant to diagnose you with anything, right? But just taking a look at those tendencies that are inside me that might be a little bit on that over-internalizing or that dismissive kind of aloof side of things. Because our goal at Renew is to help individuals grow. We want you to grow optimally and we want your relationships to thrive, right? So if that's going to happen, if you're going to grow and your relationship's going to thrive, being able to look at yourself, receive the information and feedback from others, and apply that in a way that allows you to grow optimally, that's going to be key. And learning how to balance this internalizing versus having some dismissive boundaries in any given relationship that you're in is going to be important. In this relationship, how much should I be taking in, right? And how much should I be dismissing? Now, in a relationship with your partner, my goal for you is that you both get to a healthy enough place that both of you can be in that 90 to 95% open to each other place most of the time, right? That what you're giving as feedback to your spouse isn't criticism and isn't contempt and isn't stonewalling, right? That you're sending out healthy and you're taking in healthy, right? That's the goal in a relationship, especially with your spouse. We want to make sure that you're responsible feedback givers. And we want to make sure that you're responsible feedback internalizers, right? So if you're going to hit that 95% place, and the reason I say 95 and not 100 is because none of us are on our game all the time, right? There's a lot of us that are going to grow, all of us that are going to grow our whole life, right? Which means that there's going to be days that you're in a less responsible place to be giving each other feedback. You're caught up more in your own stress or your own anger or your own injuries in life, right? And those can come out in sharp daggers sometimes at your partner, that we would want to make sure that my spouse, that my wife, right, is cautious about how much of that she lets in when I'm in a bad day, right? But for the most part, that we can count on each other 95% of the time, we can count on each other for really solid growth promoting feedback that not only helps us grow, but helps our relationship grow closer together. That's the goal. So if you want to learn more about this, if you want to learn more about this principle, take a look at our Optimal Growth video course. The Renew System for Couples video courses are tremendous in expounding on some of these principles that I'm teaching you right now. And this one's in our Optimal Growth one. So take a look at that. Learn a little bit about that. You might also take a look at our Maintaining Intimacy and Sex video course, especially part one. Part one goes over emotional intimacy and building emotional intimacy and language of emotional intimacy that can be really helpful to building your relationship stronger, as well as the whole module. That's the W in Renew. So that whole module also talks about conflict and how to navigate conflict. You can look at our Resolving Differences one as well. All of these are key to this principle, but this one's mainly in the Optimal Growth, and I checked that out. So if you have any questions, comments about this, feel free to comment below. We love hearing from you. If you have different video ideas for us that you'd like for us to create a video about, different topics that matter to you, comment below. We'd love to take a look at that. And if you haven't already, subscribe, like us, turn on the alarms, right? So that each time we deliver a video, you're sure to get that. So it's awesome to be with you again today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll be with you again soon.